Every year, over 60 million pounds of Mullet Roe are harvested across diverse regions, including the Mediterranean coast of Italy and the vibrant fishing communities of Taiwan and Japan. It is used to make a coveted product known as bataga. In Taiwan's Tainan Harbour, advanced farming techniques have boosted annual Mullet Roe harvests by 20%, reaching over 2 million pounds. On average, a single mullet can yield up to 5% of its body weight in roe, meaning a large fish can provide nearly a pound of this prized product. Similarly, Japanese fishermen in the Seto Island Sea process around 3,000 fish daily, contributing approximately 10 million pounds to the global market annually. Meanwhile, Florida's burgeoning market sees annual catches surpassing 1.5 million pounds, driven by increasing domestic and international demand. Once harvested and prepared, Mullet Roe undergoes a meticulous curing process, which significantly influences the pricing of the global $250 million bataga industry. The priciest bataga comes from Italy and can fetch up to $200 per pound. Roe sacks are carefully washed to eliminate impurities before being heavily salted. The salting process can last anywhere from a few hours to a full day, depending on the size of the roe. The roe are then pressed by stacking up on each other under heavy weights. After this, they are washed one by one. Next is the drying process, which is done differently in different countries. Japanese and Taiwanese factories employ traditional sun-drying techniques, flipping every 2 to 3 hours depending on the sun's intensity. Because the roe membrane can be easily broken, some facilities patch the broken roe with pig intestine membranes. The patching step is probably the most time-consuming in the entire process. This requires at least 5 skilled workers for a batch of 3,000 roe. These facilities process approximately 3 million pounds of roe annually for the US and European markets export. Meanwhile, Italian makers hang them up in the shade. This unique treatment gives the final product its firm, golden brown texture and characteristic aroma. Once dried, the bataga is vacuum sealed and distributed to gourmet markets and fine dining establishments worldwide. In Italy, some of the most popular dishes include classic spaghetti with bataga, while in Taiwan, grilled bataga is preferred. Its bold flavour isn't for everyone, but those who appreciate it often become lifelong fans. It's easy to see why. A harmonious blend of sweetness, savoury notes, and a creamy texture sets this delicacy apart from other seafood options. Sturgeon, especially beluga, can take nearly 20 years to mature before their roe can be harvested. That's why it can fetch up to $25,000 per pound, making it one of the most expensive foods in the world. At this facility, only 10 to 20% of fish are harvested each year. This is after careful screening using ultrasound technology to ensure top quality eggs. Once mature, the fish are either anesthetized or euthanized before their roe is surgically removed. This is done by cutting open the fish and delicately removing the egg sac, a process called stripping. You see, there isn't a drop of blood when cutting because the fish were washed thoroughly beforehand. The firm texture of the eggs is a key marker of quality, with larger eggs fetching larger prices. Some farms use a less invasive method, milking eggs from living sturgeon at 43 degrees Fahrenheit to spare their life and save money. The eggs are then separated from the egg sac by gently rubbing them over a metal grate to remove impurities. About 8 fish are processed a day, and that usually produces around 16 million eggs. If needed, blood clots or malformed eggs are carefully picked out using tweezers. This process can take about an hour per batch. At Marshallberg Farms, one of the biggest caviar farms in the US, after roe extraction, the eggs are rinsed and immediately salted with fine, natural mine salt. This step is crucial, as it not only enhances the flavor, but preserves the caviar for retail for up to 3 months. Once prepared, the caviar is packed into airtight tins, graded, and shipped all around the world. Caviar is typically graded into 2 main categories: superior and classic. Superior caviar features larger, lighter colored eggs with a firmer texture, priced at around $1,200 a pound, while classic caviar with smaller, darker eggs sells for around $798 a kilogram. Some caviar is aged for up to 3 months, which deepens the flavor while boosting the delicacy's value. While the Caspian Sea is one of the world's most renowned regions for caviar, because of their attraction of some of the most popular sturgeon species, the fish are now farmed globally. In 2023, the US imported $19.8 million worth of caviar, with China dominating 70% of the market. However, American farms are also quickly rising, producing over 5,300 pounds of caviar annually, more than double the previous year's output. Salmon roe, also known as ikura in Japan, are its biggest consumer and is processed similarly to caviar. The texture is delightful, a satisfying pop when you gently press the eggs against the roof of your mouth, followed by a burst of juicy flavor. Raising and processing these fish is labor intensive, so though less expensive than caviar, salmon roe still sells for around $100 a pound in the US. Salmon roe comes in various sizes, from the tiny 5mm pearls of the sockeye salmon to the larger centimeter-sized eggs of chum salmon. The eggs have a honey-like consistency and color. For a Japanese culinary experience, try ikura sushi. This traditional dish features a strip of nori seaweed wrapped around sushi rice, topped with a generous dollop of salmon roe. Many people prefer salmon roe because, while it's not as expensive as caviar, it is packed with nutrients, including omega-3 fatty acids and minerals that increase your resistance to UV radiation and combat sun damage. Harvesting herring roe on kelp is a traditional method used to produce commercial herring roe, particularly in regions like Alaska and British Columbia. The unique thing is that herring roe can be eaten immediately right after harvest, because it's not actually in the fish. Every spring, fishermen place submerged kelp beds in the ocean, where herring is predicted to spawn. The fish lay the eggs on the kelp leaves, and the roe-covered kelp is carefully collected. You can even see the first sign of spawning from above, which is the light-coloured water because herring eggs are white. Some other places use different types of plants instead of kelp. The plants are soaked for only 2 to 3 days or until the water starts to clear. Once harvested, the plants are processed by washing and curing to prepare the roe for market. The roe is immersed in a salty brine solution for up to 24 hours. This technique is prized for its sustainability, as it allows herring populations to remain largely intact while producing valuable roe for export, especially to Japan, where it's considered a delicacy called kazanuko. However, harvesting herring roe this way is not as productive as harvesting the whole fish with a large net. In Kodiak, Alaska alone, over 15,000 tons of herring roe are processed annually. Factories in places like Hokkaido, Japan, handle 4,000 pounds of roe daily. For markets in Europe and the US, roe is often packaged fresh or frozen and shipped in vacuum-sealed bags to preserve freshness during transport. Japan remains the largest importer, with nearly 90% of Alaska's roe exports headed to Japanese markets, where herring roe is a staple for the New Year celebrations. After processing, premium quality kazanoko can sell for over $120 a pound, especially when sold in specialty stores or directly to high-end restaurants. Louisiana is the pack leader in the production of shrimp, the most consumed seafood in the United States. But behind the scenes, shrimpers struggle to keep up with rising costs and the competition from cheap farm shrimp imports. This has created an intense battle for survival. It wasn't always like this. For decades, Louisiana shrimpers thrived. But since the 1980s, expenses have skyrocketed. Fuel prices alone account for nearly 30% of a shrimper's daily operating costs. But with inflation, that number has jumped even higher. Despite these rising costs, shrimpers still head out at sunset. This is when the shrimp will emerge from their hiding places in the sediment and roam the shallow waters. Shrimpers drop their nets, careful not to drag along the bottom to avoid damaging the sea floor. They rely on the current to carry shrimp into their nets. Knowing that shrimp aren't the best swimmers, they drift along, taking a ride on the current. When the nets come back up, the catch is dumped onto the deck. The crew then sorts through it by hand, tossing aside bycatch fish and other marine creatures caught unintentionally, before icing down the shrimp to keep them fresh. Shrimpers often spend 12 to 16 hours at sea, and there's no guarantee of success. Even with precise knowledge and experience, a night's work can turn up little more than a net full of catfish. On top of that, pesky dolphins wait just below the surface, and they sometimes rip holes in the nets to get themselves a free meal, leaving the shrimpers with hours of mending and a lost catch. The price of new nets for shrimpers has even more than doubled, and that of ice for shrimpers has increased from $14 to $26 a block. An average day can yield around 1,000 pounds of shrimp, depending on the season. The primary shrimp caught in the US is the white shrimp, brown shrimp, and a small portion of pink shrimp. Louisiana's shrimpers contribute nearly 100 million pounds to the US shrimp market each year, making it the leading state for shrimp production. Once the shrimp are unloaded at the dock, they begin a swift journey through the processing plant. Many American families have been processing shrimp for over a century, but today there are fewer processors who only work with Gulf shrimp. This plant in Louisiana handles up to 30 million pounds of shrimp annually, using both traditional and cutting-edge techniques. The first step is washing and sorting the shrimp by size. They are then fed into machines that split the shells to create easy peel shrimp. After that, the shrimps are graded and the qualified ones drop into these boxes. Each shrimp is flash frozen at -400 degrees Fahrenheit, which preserves freshness for transportation. Then the shrimps are partitioned into 5-pound bags, each with a traceability barcode. Traceability has become increasingly important to consumers and retailers alike, especially when competing with farm shrimp from countries like India and Ecuador. Fresh Gulf shrimp, often priced between $7 to $10 a pound, depending on the season, must compete with cheaper, imported varieties, lowering its price down to less than $4 a pound. Once processed, the shrimp are shipped to markets, restaurants, and grocery stores across the country. The US consumes over 1.5 billion pounds of shrimp annually. Fresh shrimp barbecue served in high-end restaurants to the New Orleans famous po' boy sandwiches, an iconic shrimp dish loaded with fried shrimp in a soft French baguette. Approximately 3,000 pounds of shrimp could be consumed weekly in each shop. Despite its $1.3 billion contribution to the economy, Louisiana's shrimp industry is fighting for survival, as 96% of shrimp docks have closed. At the heart of the issue is competition from farmed shrimp. Countries like India, Thailand, and Indonesia now dominate the global market, producing shrimp at a fraction of the cost due to lower labor costs and government subsidies. The shrimp is often farmed and raised in overcrowded pens that pollute coastal waters. In India, shrimp farms have contributed to the destruction of mangroves, ecosystems that are vital to protecting coastlines and supporting marine life. Without proper oversight, antibiotics are used in these farms, contributing to the rise of superbugs, bacteria resistant to antibiotics, and they've already killed nearly 1.3 million people around the world annually. Shrimp farming in some countries has been linked to forced labor and dangerous working conditions. Many workers, often women, labor for hours in frigid conditions, peeling shrimp by bare hand for meager wages, often with little or no protective gear. Despite the clear difference in quality, the US lacks proper oversight to ensure imported shrimp is safe. Only around 1% of imports are inspected for contaminants like banned antibiotics. A 2017 study from Louisiana State University found that 30 out of 42 shrimp samples in the US tested positive for antibiotics or antimicrobials that are illegal in the US. This situation leaves US shrimpers fighting an uphill battle against foreign competition. In 2023 alone, the US imported 1.7 billion pounds of shrimp, nearly equal to 90% of the country's total consumption. These imports, while 30% cheaper, are putting immense pressure on domestic shrimpers. They now have to compete with shrimp farms that can produce year-round, unlike wild shrimpers who are restricted by seasons and quotas. At its peak in the 1990s, Louisiana's shrimp industry supported 22,000 jobs. Today, that number is shrinking as boats sit idle and processors close their doors, producing 20% less shrimp than at their peak. Many shrimpers have invested their life savings into their boats, hoping to pass them down or sell them for retirement. But now, no one is buying. The market has been flooded with imported shrimp, much cheaper than what local shrimpers can produce. Shrimpers find themselves in a bind. They can't get a decent price for their shrimp, and they can't sell their boats to escape the cycle. Back in Louisiana, some shrimpers are trying to push for change. They want more inspections of imported shrimp and stronger regulations that would level the playing field. They're also advocating for labeling laws that would require restaurants and grocery stores to clearly indicate where their shrimp comes from. Such transparency could help consumers make informed choices, supporting local shrimpers and protecting their health. Yet, even with new laws in place, some restaurants still pass off imported shrimp as local, taking advantage of the cheaper prices. But the tide may be turning. Fines are now imposed on restaurants that falsely label imported shrimp as domestic. The Louisiana Health Department has issued over 2,000 violations for restaurants mislabeling seafood. Still, it's gonna take more than fines to save the local shrimping industry. The reality is that Louisiana shrimpers are struggling. Some have seen their dock prices for shrimp drop by half in recent years, even as the cost of running their boats has risen. It's not just the shrimpers who are hurting. Dock owners, some of whom who have been in the business for generations, are seeing fewer and fewer boats coming in to unload. The industry has been hit by hurricanes, oil spills, and now a flood of cheap shrimp from abroad. Despite the odds, the shrimpers of Louisiana keep going out. They do it for the love of the sea, the tradition, and the hope that one day things might get better. But without significant changes, that hope might not be enough.